Welcome back to Ready, Set, Sold. I'm your host, Bryan Vogt, and I am pleased to have Deb Rust with New American Funding with us. She's been with us the last two segments of this show, and Dave was with us for the first segment. He had to break away, understandable, but Deb's agreed to stay on and talk about some more about the lending process. And let's face it, in real estate, you don't have to be too knowledgeable even on the lending process or even on the real estate process. That the key factor in everything is money. And if you don't have the money, the negotiations doesn't really matter. And we've had situations where, unfortunately, every parties came to agreement, but the money wasn't there. And we talked in the last segment how with New American Funding and Deb Rust, how you can make that process go much, much quicker and much, much smoother. And when you're looking for a lender, that's definitely something that you really need to ask. How long is this going to take? It varies so much. Again, last segment I talked about banks can sometimes take 2 weeks. That may not be what you want to hear when you have a hot market like we do right now in the housing market. With that said, I wanted Deb to talk about the fact, as I talked in the last segment, we recently just had a situation where we know of some sellers that they were able to sell their house in 2 days and they got full price, and all of a sudden they were completely happy, but then all of a sudden a little bit of fear got into their voice and they said, oh my gosh, well, okay, now we need a lender. Now we need to get this going, and now what do we do? And again, it's a nice problem to have, but there's ways to kind of get away from that. And one of the things that we're always encouraging is to talk to the lender when you put your house on the market, meaning expecting good things. Hopefully you and your agent are expecting a quick sale and fast and top dollar. And Deb, I'm sure you've worked with people in that same situation, correct?
Yeah, what you find is homeowners currently, they could have been in their home for 20, 30 years and unaware of, what lending practices have changed and what's going to be required, or even in a lot of cases what their scores are, So, if you've been sitting, pretty or sitting tight in your house and making your payments on time and, you find yourself in a situation where you're going to need financing and you need to know how much, you need to know your buying capacity, all that. So, yeah, it's never a bad idea as a seller to, hope for, plan for, a quick sale just so you can have your ducks in a row.
Well, and I think that's true. And again, the same process we talked about earlier segments. The same process, just because you're a seller now, those same things come into play. You're still going to have your tax returns. You're going to have to have all those same items. That's correct, right, Deb?
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And so having those things ready to go, it just gives more sellers a peace of mind when they've sold their home, that they know the direction they're going, that they know what they can afford, and it just gives them more confidence to buyers. And I'm sure you found that to be true with buyers and sellers that now become buyers, correct?
Right, absolutely. You're amazed sometimes at how many sellers come into the market as a buyer and thinks that the only loan possibility is one with 20% down, or whatever the cases might have been in years past. So it's kind of neat to educate the first time home buyer again, which isn't technically a first time home buyer, but yeah, it's important to get in front of them.
Well, Deb, and that's something that I hear you loud and clear, and being in the business and you being in the business the period of time you have, it's funny, sometimes we forget, I always have to be reminded, I'm sure you do too, is forget what we already know. There's so many different things that we know, and again, that 20%, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, was almost a given that you almost had to have that. You used to have 10%. And
right.
That now, if you've been living in a house for 10 years, you basically really are a new home buyer, right? It's been a while, right?
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I blow people's minds sometimes with you don't need a down payment anymore in certain circumstances, and that's just, and even the interest rate being in the single digits, if you haven't bought in a while, it's changed. I always joke, I've been doing this for 23 years, And I'm no smarter than someone that just joined the business last week. Not because it changes that fast.
No, that's a good point. And I think to follow up on that, though, is that I've known Deb for a while now, and I appreciate what she's saying, but she really does know her stuff, and she knows how to help people, and that's really important, is just making those connections, making things happen. But talking about that with the sellers, and I'll speak now on the selling side, sometimes sellers have it locked in their head that they have to put 20% down on the next house. And so when I say about talking to a lender prior, maybe the day or two before putting your house on the market, someone like Deb Rust at New American Funding, that all of a sudden those things, you have more latitude. So we always want to get top dollar, but maybe we're only able to get X amount of dollars, but it's not that 20% or it's not that 10%. There are a lot of great programs, and the cost with interest rates so low, right, Deb, that it has little or no effect.
All right. Right. It could be the thing that pushes the seller off the fence of accepting a little bit lesser offer if they knew they didn't need, the proceeds necessarily to get something else.
And I think that's what we're always talking about. That's what this program's about. I know that's what Deb, that you and Dave talk about all the time. We're informational specialists. That's really what we give, and that's what you should be looking for in a realtor and a lender, home inspector, anybody in the process, insurance, that we're informational providers. And what we do is we give information of what's going on currently and give you the best advice. And that usually, Deb, and I think you'd agree with this, that's advice that we've seen other people do, that other buyers have gone through this path, and it's worked out well, correct?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing, I wouldn't trade my 23 years for anything, just for the fact that I've seen almost everything. So I know the workaround.
It's true, and I think you'd agree with this. I've been in this for quite a while. I say that, and tomorrow I'm going to see something I ain't never seen before.
Without question.
Well, hey, we're running out of time here. I want to thank again Dave Hohe, that was in the first segment, and of course our special guest also, Deb Rust of New American Funding, for joining us today. The information has again been timely and been great. I want to thank you so much, Deb, for joining us today.
Thank you always for having me. I love it.
All right. With that, we're going to be going and talking about our tip of the week in the next segment. In the meantime, pick up the book. It's free. Fill out a little bit of information. Go to ReadySetSold.org. Not.com. Pick up a free book, 12 proven steps to get your home sold for top dollar and a fast sale in St. Louis Metro East. With that, we'll see you in the field.